Welcome to Life-Changing Challengers, the podcast where passion meets purpose. I'm Brad Minus, your host, guiding you through stories of transformation and triumph, from endurance feats to overcoming adversity. Our guests defy the limits and inspire action. Ready to ignite your desire and incinerate your barriers? Join us. Your journey to the extraordinary begins now. And welcome back to another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. As always, I am your host, Brad Minus, and I am super lucky to have Katherine Lazaruk with us today. She is a professional presence expert, an executive coach, and the author of Executive Being, Humanizing Business One Leader at a Time. Hey, Katherine, how you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I am excellent and much better that I'm speaking with you. I'm excited. But the first question, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what was the complement of your family, and what was it like to be Katherine as a kid?
I would be happy to share that. I grew up in a small town in northern BC called Prince George, which has about 85,000 people. And I grew up in my immediate family with my mother and my father and my brother. My family is really, really good at the basics. They're super great at food, housing, education, extracurricular activities. They're really great at all that stuff. They have a great sense of humor. They're super gritty and they're very smart people. And so I got the experience of learning how to read really early. So I could read by the time I was age 4. My mother's a teacher. Dad's a boilermaker, a welder. And he traveled a lot for work. So we had my mom at home quite a lot and he was away a lot for work. My brother played hockey and I sang in a choir when I was growing up, in a competitive children's choir in Prince George, which is it seems a bit odd to have a high level competitive choir in a small city like that. But I just happened to luck into a choir director that had high standards. So that was really great. And it was interesting because what my family didn't get is they didn't really understand how to manage emotional things. So lots of feelings, but they didn't really understand kind of what to do. I'm a person who has a really big emotional range, and they didn't really know what to do with feelings. They didn't really feel their own feelings. They didn't really know what to do with mine. And turns out that that's actually kind of a bedrock of my personality. So I kind of missed that part in terms of coaching and development. So I've been spending the last number of years working on it and figuring out how to harness the power of that and how to stay regulated and how to surf the waves so that then my frontal cortex can come back online and I can make decisions clearly with all of the information that the emotional wave gives me and then move forward.
Oh, well, that's interesting. So your brother played hockey and you live in Canada. Surprise.
Right? Dad coached. I had to learn about hockey and self-defense because it wasn't really my thing. We spent a lot of time at the rink.
So you never got on the skates?
No. I mean, I did figure skating because that's the thing.
Okay.
You do figure skating, you do swimming, you do all the different sportsy type things, but I never really did team sport. My brother and father played golf, so they golfed quite a bit. And so I would be on the golf course tagging along. But yeah, I'm not much of a sportsy person. And I'm not really sure. I think I just went artsy.
Yeah. So you were in the choir. That's great.
Yeah.
So were you in the choir all the way through high school?
Yeah, I started when I was 10 and went all the way through till I graduated high school at the age of 17. And it was interesting because when I first started, my mother and Sandra Meister, who was the director, they sat beside each other at a teacher's workshop. And that's how my mother found out about the choir. And she said, "Oh, I have a daughter who loves to sing," but I could not sing. I was loud and I couldn't sing more than about, 5. My range was really limited and I couldn't sing in tune for very long. So it was interesting that I managed to get into this choir. And then that, of course, transformed my ability dramatically. And when I left school, I actually went to university for opera and then sang professionally for a short time after graduating.
Really? Wow. That's fantastic. So this is some things that I have not shared with on this podcast is that when I was in high school, I wasn't good at sports, but I liked sports. So I was on the sporting side, but I loved musical theater. So I used to go to wrestling practice.
Yes.
And put on my dance skier and then go to dance class for 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. So, and then of course, I had a vocal coach as well. And then I went to school. When I went to university, one of the majors was fine arts, acting, directing. So yeah, so I've been there, done that, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I get it. I totally get it. And I love the art.
It's like you have the perfect mix of training for like being a star in the WWE. Yeah, I know that's not real wrestling, obviously, but
What? Of course it's real.
Sorry. I said that out loud. That was my inside voice.
No, it's fine.
It's entertainment. It's great. I grew up watching wrestling, George the Animal and Hulk Hogan and I grew up watching those guys. So,
Okay, brother.
well, you're right.
Yes. So university. So is that your major was opera?
Yeah, that was my first degree. I did my first degree in voice performance. And then my parents said, get a real job. So then I did a degree in education. And that's what funneled me into singing professionally and then teaching music in the elementary school system.
Oh, nice. I love it. I went to at the time it was a educational college. So it was a teaching college. Right. Now I thought about it, but I was like, I don't want to do that. But my parents said the exact same thing. You need to get a real job. I have a communications degree and I have a master's in business. So that happened. I'm right there with you. Performance, wanted to perform, kept performing, and then got into other things like endurance sports.
Yeah.
It's all right. We're here to talk about you. Yeah. So you finished up school. Did you do anything else while you were in school? Were you part of any other extracurricular activities?
It was just music is pretty all consuming when you're in the program because you're doing rehearsals, you're long days, you're in class. In the summers, I would go back to Prince George and work as a telephone operator for the phone company. And then when I graduated my education degree in 95, then I worked as a telephone operator for the phone company in Vancouver. And then I just stayed down here in Vancouver for the rest of, now I've lived here longer than I lived in Prince George.
Wow. That's nice. That's our port stop to go to Alaska, at least from here.
Yeah, it's true. I've always loved Vancouver. So even when I was a kid, my mother grew up here in Burnaby, which is a suburb of Vancouver. Like it's just basically one street away from Vancouver. It's just literally, it's all city, right? So it's just the next municipality over. And she grew up in Burnaby. So we would come down every summer and visit my Baba and my Guido and my cousins and aunt and uncle. And I have always loved Vancouver. So when it was a choice of university to go to Edmonton or Vancouver, the choice was pretty easy for me to get to go to Vancouver instead.
Nice.
Weather is much nicer.
It is.
If you love snow, you would love Edmonton, but it's not that I don't love snow, but I love Vancouver.
I live in Tampa, Florida for a reason. I grew up in Chicago.
Chicago's great city.
Oh, not the moment, but growing up there, it was nice from April till November. From December till March was not so nice.
Cold.
Super cold. Yeah. So I didn't mind the snow, but the cold is really what bothered me. So yeah, that led me down here to Tampa.
I know when you.
Yeah. And I totally slap myself because here in Tampa, for some reason, 50 degrees Fahrenheit feels much colder than 50 degrees in Chicago because of the humidity. And slap myself. I'm like, Minus, you're from frickin' Chicago. What the heck?
Once you get, it's the same in Vancouver, that it's very damp cold. So once you get down here, -10 Celsius feels like -20 in a drier climate.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
No, I hear you. So you went and you kept on with this telephone operator, which I'm assuming was more digital than, you weren't pulling things out, putting things back.
Rigid? Yes, I was, because I started out as a radio operator. So they still had the cord board, the plug in, the manual time clock. Yeah.
The PB.
Believe it or not, in the 90s, they still had the plug in cord board. And I was operating for super remote places in the world. So, or in BC. So I would be on graveyard shift and I'd get the call at 3 a.m. from Kid Katla or his place out. Some of the logging camps had lots of marriage proposals, that kind of thing. It was fun.
Did you plug your nose sometimes when you talked? Did you go, hello?
No.
Operator KL.
Never did.
How can I direct your call? Yeah. Okay.
No, we never did that. We used to have, no, the most trouble we got into is we sometimes have like fights with the cords because then you could shock each other at the time. I mean, there's a bunch of college students goofing around. What are you going to do, right?
I hear you. So so you had graduated with a teaching degree.
I did. Well, so that was my summer job. So then I got into teaching. I actually, because I had a music specialty, it was easy for me to get, I started out as a sub and then I got a part-time contract and then I got in the following year. So I was quite lucky. The first year I was out on the job, I substituted at a school. They needed someone for like this strange little part-time gig that was just every afternoon with 9 grade ones because it was a kindergarten grade 1 split and the kindergartens would go home. And so my teaching partner taught the kindergarten grade 1 in the morning and I taught the grade 1s in the afternoon. And then the next year, like what happens up in Vancouver is you get a temporary contract and then you get let go and then you get another temporary contract. So you move around quite a bit when you're first starting out. So I did that first year and then I went to another small school and did different job shares. And yeah, I think I went to 3 or 4 different schools in the course of the first 4 years.
Did you remain in that elementary grade level or did you actually move around different ones?
No, I stayed, no. And my last postings were all music. So I taught music from kindergarten to grade 4.
Enjoy it?
Yes. Okay, there were parts of it that I enjoyed, but mostly I enjoyed ditching the curriculum altogether and thinking to myself, okay, what do these kids need to be musically literate at an age appropriate level by grade 4? And that's what I taught them. So I was a bit of a, oh, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
A bit of a shit disturber. Like, okay, I'm not doing this. This doesn't make any sense to me. I tend to follow common sense quite a lot. And so in this case, I was thinking, this is like, why am I teaching all these things when I could be teaching them practical skills?
Right.
And actual musical development as opposed to I mean, yes, you want to teach things through gamification, but just sitting around and singing songs and playing games is lovely. It's not, in my opinion, an act of musical education.
I get it.
But it's not education.
I mean, there's some math that goes on. I try not to, I'm trying to stay away from my own thing, but I don't tell a lot of people this stuff. I went through from 3rd grade till my senior year in high school. I played clarinet all the way through and then in the band, and then I played saxophone once I got to high school. And I think it was E flat clarinet and bassoon once because the fingering is pretty much the same. All you had to do is get the armature. So I understand it, but that's amazing. And we need good teachers. So you're not doing it now, but we definitely, at least here in the States, we are starving for good teachers.
It's interesting because I did think about applying for a green card and coming to work in the States because, of course, the opportunities for singing are greater in California than they are here. But when I found out that teachers were so poorly paid, they couldn't live. So I'm like, well, what's the point of that? I might as well just stay in Canada and try to travel and see what else I can do and work up here. Because up here, teachers, they're super well paid, but they're certainly paid better than teachers throughout the States.
And there are some states that pay better than others. My state of Illinois paid much better. I knew a gym teacher that and retired after 25 years, and his retirement was almost double what he actually was being paid as a salary because just the way that the investments were working in the pension. So, yeah. So, and then of course he was a gym teacher and he was like, yeah, it was the easiest job in the world. I sat down and read the paper, told him how to shoot and dribble and said, go play. And then I sat and he's like, I sat in the bleachers and I read my paper. I was like, that was it.
Okay. That is one of the things that drove me out of the system because in our system also, you could be the best teacher or you could be the one who reads the paper all day and you still get paid the same.
Right.
And there's no opportunity for merit. There's no opportunity for change, for following the students in the same way, at least when I was there. And maybe things have changed, but from my perspective, the system, we know so much more about how kids learn and the system hasn't changed really in 100 years.
You're right.
That made me crazy. I was like, this is nuts how people learn.
We are just starting to get out of this standardized testing rut. For years and years and years, it was teach to pass the test.
Right.
So people weren't
ridiculous
learning.
You're not really learning. And you're not teaching kids how to think. You're not teaching them how to look.
Yes. But it is a good conversation for all the moms and dads out there to be thinking about this stuff. So it gives a little bit of an insight, when you're talking about that, and especially into a different system that, that's much different than ours.
I think it's important to advocate, though, from the direction of some of your party officials and maybe up here as well, are going towards closing the Department of Education and shutting down public schools, I think that would be a huge mistake. Because I think well-funded, if you fund your public schools appropriately and you pay your teachers appropriately, you're going to get a much better educated populace. And with the level of civic responsibility that you have in the States, you can't really afford to have a populace that is not educated in its civil responsibilities as well. And school is a part of that.
So the plan was, when the people that were advocating for getting rid of the Department of Education at the federal level, was to scale it back way, way, way back to where maintain federal guidelines, but then was able to funnel that money back to the states. Then the states would have their own education system, but it would save $80 million. So the 80 million, like 80 billion, I'm sorry, it was $80 billion that can then use for vouchers and schools and, charter schools, and way for calling school choice, which is what the Republicans are talking about now. But let's get away from politics. No politics today. No politics today. So how long did you end up teaching for?
I taught for 12 years.
Wow.
Part-time. I never worked full-time. The largest job I had was 4 days a week teaching music. So I taught Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, had Wednesday off. And it, by all descriptions, that's a dream job.
Right.
For anybody who wants to be a music teacher. I mean, I had great kids. It was a big school. I basically did what I wanted in terms of curriculum. And like I said, I would spend one day each quarter and plan everything out. And then I would, come in at 8:30 and leave at 3:30. So I just ran everything really efficiently. But it was still really tough because it's that and opera, both of those careers have very narrow parameters. Right. And I'm not a very good small box person.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. But it took me 12 years to figure it out.
And I was about to ask you, my next question was, so why did you leave teaching?
Yeah, I was miserable for one thing, and I'm very good at getting what I wish for. And I was so miserable that I used to wish something would kill me.
Wow.
It was bad. I would stand on the SkyTrain platform and be like, oh, if I could just trip, or somebody would trip and push me and I would die and I could be free. It was bad for me. And not bad for other people that love the kind of structure that kind of system provides. But for me, it was bad. I didn't really want to be there. I didn't like the system. I wasn't enjoying a lot of my work. One of my colleagues, when I was retiring from teaching, she said to me, one thing I really admire about you, she says, I know how unhappy you are here, but it never affected the quality of your work. And I was like, okay, so I've got some resilience and some grit in there. But anyway, when I was diagnosed with a lung tumor, I was like, okay, this is a wake-up call. And my husband said, yeah, you need to find something different to do. Like these jobs, opera, teaching, it's suffocating you and you need to find something else to do. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I had tenure. I would have had to kill somebody to get fired. Basically a guaranteed job for life. And I just knew I couldn't do it anymore. So I went on medical leave and then I quit.
Yeah.
Just resigned. I had no plan. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was so miserable. Luckily, I'm well-resourced. So I had a really good counselor at the time. She really helped me because she said, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? What other job am I going to have? I got to deal with this health situation. I was kind of in a panic about it. And she said, think about the qualities you want your work to have. Not the title, not the industry, not the job, but what are the qualities you want your work to have? So one of the first things I did before I got to that was just wrote down everything I hated. Just wrote it all up, big list. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. And then I just looked at what's the exact inverse of that. Because before I find this ideal job that has all the qualities that I want, I need something to pay the bills. So I can't just go on leave forever. And so I just flipped the inverse. And then 6 months later, after the diagnosis and after leaving teaching, 6 months later, I had a job doing corporate training at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is one of the big 5 professional services firms like accounting and tax audit.
That used to work for them too.
The lung tumor was gone. So that's how it worked out for me.
All right. Well, we need to step back here for a second. So let's talk about that real quick. So, this is about overcoming adversity and everything else. So tell me about what led you to go to the doctor that ended up coming up with this, with the diagnosis.
Well, first of all, it was anxiety and depression. And then I couldn't really breathe and I kept coughing and I was sick and I was like, what's happening here? And that was when I went for chest x-rays and they're like, oh, okay, there's something here. And then I did the biopsy and the MRI, like all the tests. And they didn't know what it was exactly. It was about a ping pong ball sized tumor and it was in the lower left lobe of my lung. And they didn't know. And my mother had some theories. I guess there's a lung disease in Arizona because they are part-time in Arizona. They're snowbirds. And I had gone to visit them and apparently there's a disease down there that causes some kind of benign tumors. And she was sure that that's what it was, but they didn't know. So they said, okay, we need to just observe and see what's happening here because the data is inconclusive. So they said, we'll just watch it. And then I came in for my follow-up and they're like, okay, well, it's shrinking. So we're just going to watch it some more. Mm-hmm. And then the next time I came in, it was gone.
So
no, not in the traditional way, but I also have a really strong belief in the mind-body connection.
Mm-hmm.
And when the diagnosis came up, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what this is. I wanted something to kill me. Oh, here it is. And now I'm free and I don't need to die in order to be free. So I did a lot of visualization. I even stood in front of a mirror and wrote perfectly healthy, like in dry erase pen, right over where that part of my body was, over my lung. Did a lot of visualization. I did a lot of I had a lot of rest, of course. And I did conventional things like watching my nutrition, taking better care of myself. So I wasn't completely like out on the mind body connection, but it's my belief that was what caused it. And so that is what cured it.
So you got a biopsy. So they literally diagnosed you as a malignant tumor.
It wasn't, they didn't know. It was whatever they were looking at. They're like, we don't know.
Okay.
It's not presenting as traditional malignant. It's not, we don't know if it's fully benign. We don't know. It was complete. They didn't know. So that you can imagine that was a little bit freaky. No.
Yeah.
So
where did you go from there? That's
it was a wait and see. And the wait and see was really interesting. It was an interesting time.
How so?
Well, imagine like you've been told that you have a tumor and you're told that they don't know what it is. And then they're like, okay, we just got to wait and see if it shrinks or see what happens to it. And you're like, okay, great. Well, it could grow. It could metastasize. I don't know. And so being in a wait and see period in limbo can be really difficult because it's scary. It's uncertain. It's unknown. There's anxiety around that. So that's what I mean by interesting time. It's like, okay.
I get it. Yeah, that part is. I mean, I can imagine, but I really wanted to hear it from you.
Yeah.
But that's amazing that you were able to. That you really felt like, you took care of this yourself. It wasn't about going to get this poison that is basically put into people for chemo, right? And don't get me wrong, it's there for a reason.
100%. Yes.
I
I'm fully into Western medical stuff as well. Like it's both. So anyway, so cut you off. Now we're talking and I'm cutting you off.
No, it's okay. I do a lot of work with cancer. I've been growing up in that kind of health field for a little while. I'm a regular donator and I do fundraising for the Children's Cancer Center. So I've been around it. And so I see these kids going through and literally they're taking this poison to like strip their body of everything. And of course it takes some of the good stuff too, right? So they got to build that back later. But it does its job. So,
yes.
But sometimes the side effects are absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
And sometimes for kids, they're minimal, which is
interesting.
Yeah.
Just have some resilience in there somewhere.
Exactly. And that's why the mortality rate for kids is so much better than it is for adults. So
I wonder if it's a little component of ignorance is bliss. They don't know enough about cancer, so they can't ruminate on how bad it is and therefore kill their chances of getting better.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
But you manifested yourself healthy again.
I did. And actually that's the first time I did it. And I did it again for a vocal injury, actually. I don't know, I guess that was 6 or 7 years ago. I do still sing. And at that time I was fronting a vintage jazz band, like an 18-piece big band jazz and singing big band jazz. And we were doing rehearsal, and I hit a high note the wrong way and was like, oh, I could feel like this pop. And I'm like, that's not good. And so I went to an ENT, and they're like, yeah, you have like, basically it looks like a blood blister on the vocal fold. Like it's basically blew out one of your cords.
Oof.
And they said, okay, it's complete vocal rest for 3 months. And I'm like, well, that can't be true. And so I started Googling around for other options, and I found a speech pathologist here in Surrey, which is another suburb of Vancouver. And she had a different camera, like a different imaging technology. So I went to see her, and she took a really clear image of it. And she's like, okay, I need to send these films to the voice doctor, the surgeon, and he'll get you into surgery right away because these things don't heal without surgery. Just not possible. And I'm like, okay, all right. So took the images. She gave me some vocal exercises to do. And I spent, like for my business, I don't know, a month or month and a half doing networking with flashcards. I used my phone and a Bluetooth keyboard with my clients because I wasn't talking. But I was doing these exercises. And about a month and a half later, maybe 2 months later, I finally got an appointment with this doctor. And it turns out he had not received the images she had sent him. And when I got to his office 2 months later, she happened to be there that day. And I said, hey, Sherry, listen to me talking. And she's like, listen to you talking. What is going on? I said, well, I did your exercises, and I visualized, because again, I could see, because I had an image, a literal camera image of healthy vocal cord on one side and the injured vocal cord on the other side. And I just consistently continued to imagine healthy vocal cords, did the exercises. And so when I got into the surgeon's chair, he's like, oh, you're totally fine. They took another image, completely healed. And he said, if I had seen those images, I've had you in surgery the next week. We have never seen this injury heal without surgery.
Wow. What a great case study for The Secret.
Right?
That's amazing.
Totally. So, but now have good medical data, because now they're like, oh, someone else used these vocal exercises and was able to heal. So then maybe they wouldn't rush to surgery for singers either, right? Maybe they'd be like, okay, we can try this other protocol first and see if that works better.
Unbelievable. I love that aspect of getting people without, healthy without being cut.
Yeah.
And just because I worked for a surgeon for 4 years, and, it was like, thing was to get them to surgery because that was where the money was. I'm like, we need people in the surgery center. That's where all the cash is made. And I could not stand it in the back of my head. That's all I'm thinking about is, oh, let's find a way to get them into surgery for the smallest thing or the biggest thing. So the idea that there are other ways, and you're living proof. I've heard about it, never actually known or spoken to someone that said they did it, that actually, I've seen it for emotional stuff. I've done it for people have talked about their careers and professional lives, but I've never anybody talked to me about it as an actual, let's call it a cure for some certain things by using the mind-body connection, and along with obviously, exercises and things like that. But that's fantastic.
Yeah, it didn't just happen on its own. But even if you're talking about The Secret doesn't do that either. The Secret's like, while you pray, move your feet, right? Actually, I think that's an African proverb, right?
No.
It's just visualize and hope that it happens. It's like visualize and take steps at the same time.
Yes. So that definitely is there. So, so you mentioned you were already coaching. So all right, let's step back. You listed all the stuff that you hated, you inversed it, you figured out what you liked. What was the next step there?
So then I had the job doing corporate training.
Right.
And that was the inverse of the school in many ways, right? I'm working with adults. I get to go downtown to a nice building. I go up to my office in an elevator. I wear nice clothes all the time. I don't have to worry about getting dirty. I get to eat lunch out, like those kinds of things, right? It was inverse in that way, even though it was still teaching. Right. But in between that period, I had been working with a coach, and he literally asked me one day, well, what are you going to be when you grow up, little lady? Because I was in this transition. And I had a vision. It was super weird. But I literally had this vision of the first company name and the first tagline I ever used. And it was ICU in a circle, Times New Roman font, silver lettering, purple background. image consulting underneath it. And then the first tagline I ever used was intensive care for your image. And I just started to laugh. I'm like, that's not even a real job. Who does that job? And he said, it's a real job. You could do that job. And because there's no regulation in the industry at all, like you could literally hang your shingle out tomorrow and say, I'm an image consultant and nobody would blink. I thought, okay, I look all right. I've read some books. I will get a website and some business cards and start practicing. So that's what I did. And I built my business up around my corporate job. And when I was divinely ejected from my corporate job in the middle of the recession in 2009, I thought, this is great. I can go to Toronto and I can go get my training in image consulting and actually get my certifications. And then I'll just do this full time. And so that's what I did after that.
More freaking manifestation.
You're right. It was so weird. And actually, going back to the qualities you want your work to have, that question that the counselor asked me a long time ago, I did come up with my 5 qualities. And my 5 qualities were freedom, needed to have a lot of flexibility, a lot of autonomy in my work, beauty, and not just physical beauty, but soul beauty. Like I want my world to be beautiful, beautiful. Needed beauty. I needed joy. I wanted to feel joyful in my work. And I wanted to have generosity, like an element of give back in my work, legacy, and then ease of spirit, so that whatever I was doing at any given time, I would have the sense of I'm in the right place at the right time doing the right thing. But if you had told me that that list of qualities would be met by a job called image consulting, I would have laughed my butt off. Like, I'm not that interested in fashion. I don't really like shopping. What are you talking about? Like, this makes me a bit of an outlier in that particular industry. Because what I'm really interested in is using image as a vehicle for your self-expression and self-evolution. So you can leverage the things about your body. Like, my belief is whatever container you came here to the planet in is the perfect container to do whatever you're meant to do on the planet. So the sooner you make friends with your container, the easier your life is going to roll. So your container can inform what you're going to do. It can inform what you're good at. And if you are really aligned on the inside and the outside, and you make sense to people when they meet you, it's easier to do business. It's easier to communicate. It's easier to have relationships. Life is easier.
Interesting. Well, because I would have thought the difference. I mean, the first 3 tenets of what you said, like joy, freedom, and beauty, right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Totally.
that seems to align with what what you're doing. So yeah, so that's the first thing I thought, when you said image consulting, but then when you said that you didn't think that would be something that would align with it, and I was like, oh,
No.
I don't know. I have to think about it.
Well, but this is the beauty of that exercise, because then it frees you to be inspired or to be, given a download or given the answer if you're not so attached to the title or the job or the industry. I didn't even know that this industry existed because it is still quite young. Like, it's only about, 25, 35 years old as an industry. And like even our certifying body is only 25 years old. The Association of Image Consultants International is only 25. Well, we had our 25th anniversary. So it's young. Like, the industry is young. The standards are young. It's evolving as we go.
Excellent. So you mentioned that you're not really a shopper. You're not really crazy about the whole fashion thing. So then what are you doing as an outlier to separate yourself?
I think it's primarily the way that I approach image work. So the other thing that happened in my career is I was just going along doing my image consulting thing the way that I did it. And it was really about, who are you as a person? What is your true authentic self? How are you going to show that to the world? How are you going to be comfortable in your own skin? How are you going to figure out what it is you really want? And in fact, one of my very first clients, as we were working together, she had this moment in the middle of our work. She's like, oh my God, she goes, oh my God, I'm in the wrong job. And I'm like, yeah, you're in the wrong industry. You're in the wrong job. Like, this isn't where you belong. So then our process shifted a little bit to figure out, okay, let's do some work and parse out where you might need to go that's a better fit for you. And then she ended up getting this great job that she loved, and that was totally fine. But it's this idea of doing more than just looking at somebody's clothes. And it's a very intimate process. It's a very high trust, very psychological thing. to work with somebody's image. And so as I was doing it, what would happen is my clients would go up the chain at their companies. They would say, we want you to come and work with our executive teams, but we're tired of explaining to the people that write the checks that you're not really an image consultant, that you're doing more than that. So we need you to change your business. And I'm like, okay, sure. Okay. So I took from ICU Image Consulting, I went to just Lazaruk Consulting, just straight up my name, consulting. And now I can do what I like. Again, freedom, right? I'm not bound by leadership or whatever the buzzword is. I'm not bound by that. I can just do what I like.
Nice. Yeah, because I've seen that you not only do the image consulting, but you're also doing business coaching and executive coaching, corporate team coaching. So yeah.
Speaking, surely I don't really do business coaching per se. I sometimes am working with clients on their approach to business, but I've helped a couple of smaller entrepreneurs get started just because I've done it. So it's like, I can help you do that, but it's not really my jam. I tend to refer clients that are looking for business coaching to some of the really great business coaches that I know that are fully focused on that. For me, it's more about looking at all the different areas that touch your life. Like, we might start with your image, but like, for example, I had a client who was working on her career progression and we're working on her image because of that. And then she got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And all of a sudden we had to pivot and say, okay, what do you need to apply to your life now from the work that we've been doing in order for you to get healthy and you to heal? And so we talked a lot about some of the principles that I used, visualizations, like things looking at what are the bare minimums that you need to do? Like, what are the things that you need to do to maintain your mindset, to maintain your body, to encourage yourself to be healthy? So it touches a lot of different areas. Like, I've ended up talking to clients about things that are happening in their relationship because I happen to have been married for a really long time and I kind of get how that works. Like, so the thing that I really love about my work is clients usually come expecting one thing and they end up getting way more than they expected, which is always fun. It's the surprise factor that I love. Like, oh, we're going to go here? Okay, let's go. Oh, we're going to go there? Okay, let's go. Okay, is that outside my wheelhouse? Here's 3 counselors I can refer you to. Here's 3 business coaches I can refer you to. Here's a couples therapist you might need to go and see. Right?
Yeah,
Once it gets to the wheelhouse. But I've got a fair amount of agility when it comes to helping people with life.
Yeah, and you've got a network of people that you can refer people to. So I'm the same way. The first company when I started coaching, well, I shouldn't say the first company. I still have the same company, but I changed the name. I actually called it. It's funny. I called it Iron Goof.
My real name was last. I love it. Goof is good.
Iron Goof run and try coaching. Okay. Try and run coaching. Because I was trying to play on the words a little bit. Try and run. TRI. And run. Yeah, right. So try and run coaching. That was the first one. And the reason that came about was, so I did the Chicago Marathon.
Wow.
And I had a team of 20 people that we were doing it for charity.
Sure.
And one of the ladies at the time was 53 and she had just done her first marathon like 6 months earlier. She did it in France. So when we were training, I saw that she could give some more. So I was like, I know that she's got more in her, and I just kind of felt it. And I hadn't started coaching yet, but I'd run quite a few races.
Sure.
But the thing was, this was in October. In November, I was doing my first Ironman triathlon.
Whew.
So we crossed together. I brought her with me, and I'm like, Karen, you're with me. We're gonna run this together because I wasn't gonna run all out because I had this big race in 3 weeks.
Sure.
So I was just gonna go as my legs took me. So I'm like, Karen, you're with me. So she ran in France. She ran it in 5:25. We crossed at 4:32 hand in hand.
Wow.
In Chicago. So because I knew that she had it in her and she was with me.
Yeah.
Her best friend comes by and she says, you know what, you should really coach. And I was like, I don't have any credits to coach. You know, I'm not a runner or a competitor that gets on the podium. Right.
Oh.
And she's like, yeah, but next month you'll have credit because that is big, whether you just finished or not.
Yeah.
So, I got through that. And then the very next January, we've got down here in Disney, we've got a set of races and they call it Marathon Weekend.
Okay.
And they had a thing called the Goofy Challenge, which was a half marathon on Saturday and a full marathon on Sunday. So I ended up doing that the very following January. So one of the clients, and she ended up being a client later, be like, yeah, you're such an iron goof.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Or she said iron goofy, I think. You know? And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. So that's how I kind of came up with it as that started. And then it started getting a negative connotation. Like it wasn't serious, that was what the iron was for serious. The goof was for fun.
Right. Oh, right.
Yeah. So I ended up going to my company now is called Inner Fire Endurance Sports. Also because I moved, I've delved deeper into the endurance side, but yeah. So, it's something we could probably talk about as far as, presence go. But yeah, so I get it, how you came up with, certain things, and then the professional presence expert, that's like,
I know.
Perfect.
Right. It's just one way to talk about something that is sometimes inexplicable.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think when I think about it with clients, and I wrote about it in my book as well, I talked about the 3 C's. So, but it always starts with your character. Who are you at the core? Who are you when nobody's looking? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? Character. And then you go to congruence, which is the piece I talked about earlier about your insides and outsides matching. And part of that is looking at your industry and looking at your city and looking at your country and looking at all the external factors around you. And then the 3rd C is choice. You get to choose. So, for example, if you're a lawyer, you get to choose how much of the expected norm do I want to meet or not meet, and why. Right? If you're a Reiki practitioner, are you going to wear a 3-piece suit to your sessions? Probably not, because then you'll have to spend a lot of time explaining to clients why you look the way you do, which is not the most effective use of your healing session time. So you get to make those choices and decide, because you can exert a pretty stunning amount of control over how people perceive you simply by the way that you show up. Tons of science to back it. Early on, they were doing studies and they're like, okay, 15% of your skill set is what gets you promoted. 85% is your presence, the way that you are being with people, not necessarily what you're doing with people. So that's why when I was titling my book, I was calling it Executive Being, as opposed to executive presence or anything else. Because honestly, when I was doing research, the books that are being written now about executive presence are basically the same books that were being written 30 years ago with all the same kind of dusty rules. I'm like, that's not really how the world is now, right? Finally, the executive presence world is starting to catch up with what I've been saying all along, which is you need to be who you really are and show up as that person and challenge the status quo. Because otherwise, we're never going to get anything different than we've had all along. And I'm not sure that our choices in leadership have really led us down great paths. I think we could do a little better.
I get that. I've been in the Fortune 500, situations for a long time, and I work on contracts. So my day job is I'm an IT project manager, program manager type thing. So, and I've been doing it. I did it for 20 years, 21 years, And then that's exactly right. There's been times when the minute you kind of go against the status quo, you get one of 2 things. One, you get fired.
Yeah, you get booted.
Yeah, you get booted because you're going against the norm. Or 2, you get praised and given a little bit of reins.
Yes. I really believe it's the way that you do it. So for me as a challenger, I'm a challenger. That's just my nature. I'm going to challenge people. And I remember one of my first business consultants saying to me, okay, well, if you're going to be a challenger, you can't be upset when people push back. Like if you get you can't be upset. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But so for me, I aim to be like 10% over the line.
Yeah.
Like just a little over the line, enough to like make people go, whoa, but not so far over the line that I'm totally alienating or polarizing people. Which, sometimes if you're going to be your real self, people are going to love you. They're not going to like you. They're going to, what's going to happen. But I like that phrase where it says, why do you want everybody to like you? You don't like everybody.
That's a great phrase. That's a great phrase. Yeah. Yeah.
That's an unrealistic expectation. That's just unrealistic. You're not going to connect with everybody.
And the one thing that you did mention about, how you're going to showing up, how you're being is that you really have to do that now because a lot of our meetings are like this.
That's right. It's harder. It's harder on Zoom to actually really connect with people. You have to really, I think, be even more present because you're not getting the same level of data that you would if you were meeting somebody in person.
Absolutely. I get
You're not
that.
really seeing a real person. You're seeing them filtered through a video screen. You're seeing them filtered through cold technology. So in order to get a human connection, you have to be really good at looking at the camera, for example, or you have to make sure your lighting is okay and your framing is good in order to create a warmer impression and a warmer connection with somebody that it would be really easy to do in person, much easier to do in person than it is to do through Zoom.
I agree 100%. I was was interviewing for a new project last week. It was the second interview. And I always thought I'm really old school. You know what I mean? Like when I went out for my first interviews, when we had to leave, no suit, tie, the whole bit. Right. So of course, the only thing I'm thinking about is, all right, if I'm showing up, I need to show up as if I would going to thing. And you know what the guy said? Yeah, you're overdressed for this.
Yeah. Because you're on video and you're at home.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so I got a laugh out of it,
Yeah.
Well, I told him it was. I basically said, he said you're overdressed, and I says, well, there's a reason I'm not standing up, because
That's a beautiful way to.
I would totally discount what you just said.
Yeah, like I've got pajamas on underneath.
I had shorts on, but no, it's like, oh, you're overdressed because I had a shirt and tie on. That's how I would have shown up. That's how I would have shown up to the thing. So.
Everything is contextual because my husband recently switched careers. So he was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers for 19 years in operations and he is a film editor. And so finally I was like, okay, look, you've gone and you've upgraded because when he did his training, this is like 20 years ago. So of course things have changed quite a lot. The technology's changed industries. So he went to BCIT, which is a technology school here, upgraded his technical skills. And then he has to go out and start meeting people in order to get work because Vancouver, many cities are like this, but Vancouver in particular is very insular. And it's a lot about who you know and who knows you. So when he was going to meet people, he wore a vest and a tie and a shirt because that's what he wore to work for many years. So he just wore but like casual, tie isn't too tight or anything, vest and tie and shirt. And then when he started to work, even though he's working night shift and no one's really seeing him, like maybe one or two people might see him, vest and tie and shirt, vest and tie and shirt, vest and tie and shirt. And he has been working steadily. He's not even 2 years in, and he's been working steadily since he started because people would be like, oh yeah, David Lazaruk. And they're like, who's that? The vest and tie guy. Oh, that guy.
The vest and tie guy. I like it.
Right? So it's all contextual. Absolutely 100% contextual. And I kind of, nobody loved the pandemic, obviously, but what I like about one of the after effects of that is the humanization of people. We get to see people's dogs and their cats and their messes, and you can't avoid life when you're meeting each other in your homes. And so it gave us a real opportunity to see that everybody is human. Everybody has a messy drawer somewhere.
Right.
Like everybody's got pajama bottoms on. So it's been an interesting time in helping people really be comfortable with just being who they are on screen.
And that's hard. I gotta admit, you know what I mean? And it's funny because we can even look at this episode right here that we're just talking about. When I come on, I'm always like, hey, and welcome back to Life Changing Challengers, blah, 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 blah. And then as we start to talk, I settle into really who I am. Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, but that's exactly right. And we could see this progression as the trust is built, as you start realizing that, hey, you know what, it's okay for me to be as authentic as I possibly can.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And I think it's really important that people who are in the leadership space really understand how much of a responsibility and how much of an effect they have, a responsibility for an effect they have on the room that they're in, to make this place safe for people or unsafe for people. And historically, people, I think, would rely a little bit on keeping people on their toes and making it not safe so that they would think people would try harder or, perform better. But nobody performs well under stress. Your cortisol levels are jacked up. You can't even think straight. It's not good, right?
I
Everything is better with love.
I agree to a point.
Well, maybe
there's,
but it's different.
there's gotta be a little level of competitiveness in order to strive for evolution, right? To keep
Does there?
moving forward. I think so. It doesn't, but it can be. But when I say competitiveness, I don't even actually mean with another person. There
Okay.
could be a competitive. For me, I'm a project manager, right? So we compete against the clock. We've got a certain deadline that we've got to meet, right? So we compete against the clock. That's we move forward that way, and then it's how efficiently can we move forward? Can we come up with a 10% efficiency, and then
Sure.
we can get 10. We can either be done 10% more, we get done 10% faster, or we can put 10% more work into it.
Right. Okay, but I challenge that is you say there's a deadline we have to meet, and I automatically go, but is there, and why? Unless you're a brain surgeon or like a heart surgeon, like somebody really racing against life or death, paramedic, nothing else in this world is that critical. So when people say there's a deadline we have to meet, there's this thing, we have to improve this, we have to do this, I'm like, do we? At what cost?
Well, then there's the other way around, right? So in my work, we have a 3-point pyramid: time, cost, and quality, right?
Sure.
So we have a finite budget,
Mhm.
and
Is it?
we have a certain quality. Yes. Well, yeah. You're supposed to stay in your budget. So don't.
But how many times have you been on a project and someone said, this is the budget, and then you get into it, and then all of a sudden, oh no, okay, we need more money for that, and the budget is not the budget. Like never? That never happens in your world?
It happens, but not for what you think. It's not, we get into the project and then all of a sudden we need more money because something happened. It's happened once or twice. Most of the time what happens is and it rolls downhill, somebody gives me scope creep. In other words, they want more.
That's right.
They want more into the project than we originally budgeted for.
Right.
That's how the budget moves.
Right. So. But then the budget is not finite. It's not really finite. I mean, it's finite based on these parameters, maybe, but then there's wiggle room. This is my point, is I always want it when people say, this is how it is. I'm like, but is it though? Is it? Does it have to be like that? Is there some other way? Are there other factors that we're not taking into consideration that we might need to take into consideration in order to make it even better? Like, could this be like 10% more pleasurable as opposed to 10% more efficient?
Usually, efficiency, kind of pleasurable.
This is my point. This is like the dominant paradigm, right? 10% more easily to go, but nobody's looking at, could it be 10% more pleasurable? Could it be more fun? Could we have a better experience while we're achieving more? And that to me is the point about humanizing business, is that for so long it's been efficiency and money and title and corner office and promotions as the prize. But what happens when the prize isn't the prize anymore? People are like, well, I don't necessarily want that title, or I want to have some space in my life. I want to enjoy my coworkers. I want to actually make a meaningful difference, or I want to contribute differently to this work. So this is this cognitive dissonance that a lot of leaders are having right now when they're like, they don't want to work. I'm like, they just don't want to work for you.
Yeah. I get it.
Right?
Yeah, I get
That's what I'm asking. Like, is it though?
So yeah, I'll say, yeah, I don't, we can go down a rabbit hole here. So I'm gonna cut that off. Because you could sit there and say, does it?
I know, constantly.
And then they're like, so what is this going to cost me? Yeah.
Right.
What is this going to cost me? For every hour I have another contractor working is more money. So if I've got to change tactics, now I gotta pay this person to learn how to change the tactic, which means it's going to be more money. And then
I have a concrete example.
Okay.
To share with you. So I got called in to do an email workshop for a company. They're like, we're wasting so much time doing emails. We need to do an email etiquette workshop. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I get into the company, and what I realize is, oh, it's not the email that's the problem. Your org chart is unclear and your chain of command is unclear, and people don't know who they're supposed to be talking to and when or why. And that was the underlying issue. So we did the whole psychological safety thing. We got everybody on board. We talked about connecting as a team and connecting to the mission of the company. And this is 2 days, 2-day workshop. And the estimated savings, when I followed up with them to say, okay, how's it going? What are you doing? They saved about $250,000 in the first quarter after that on email. But it wasn't about the email. And it made the whole, I'm like, this is clearly not working. What is the more pleasurable experience we could be having? It would be great if I have to be included on this because I don't think I'm needed here. Great. How do we codify that? And it was just simply looking at the communication channels and figuring things out. And it was huge savings, but it was based around, they thought it was email. I'm like, it's not about the email. What's the pleasure principle here? How do we make this better for everybody?
What?
So there are concrete savings in pleasure.
I wish I knew who you were at the time that I'm working for. So I'll tell you about this. I was working for Tampa General Hospital, which is one of the top hospitals in the country. It's actually U.S. News and World Report, the whole bit.
Right.
But I was put as a project manager for a culture change within the whole hospital. You're talking about like 15,000 employees.
Okay.
And so it started out as the structure we're using was Franklin Covey, and
Sure.
it was Stephen Covey Jr.'s book called The Speed of Trust. And the idea was to build more trust, which means that we can, people can do their jobs, nobody else's. So the interesting part is usually they start with the staff and they go up. Well, this time we were starting with the C-suite and moving back. So while I was sitting in on the workshop and they were going through, and it turned out it was the subject was meetings, and they're like, all right, well, so how many people are in the meetings? And then that led to what information do you need as a C-suite or a director,
Right.
vice president? And it was like, it started with, wait, everything,
No.
I'm like, so he started giving examples. I started, well, do you really need to know that Nurse Shelby on the 5th floor is out for the day? Do you need to know that? How is that going to help you in your work? So we started drilling down. That came onto the subject of meetings. So we started pulling up stats on all the meetings that were being held within the company and who was at it. And we started finding out that the meetings would be like 3 or 4 deep.
Right.
So we literally quantified it. Okay. We quantified all of the unproductive meetings that people were
Hours.
Oh, no. When we finally got done with them, we literally quantified it down to the freaking person down. We used the salaries, everything.
Like, yeah, totally. You can quantify it.
$60 million a year.
Right? Totally. In waste. And a waste of our time and energy.
But we only brought 30 million down to the bottom to the bottom line.
Okay.
So it was like a huge thing. And then all of a sudden the CEO is like, all right, first of all, no meeting without an agenda.
Right.
And if you don't need to know the information firsthand, if you can get it from the person that's there, that would be a trust factor.
Yes.
There's the trust factor, right?
Right.
The SME is there. They will give you notes. They will tell you what happened in the meeting. If you use the information you need and you discard all the other information.
That's right. It's discernment.
Yeah. And it was working. And I got poached by another company. But I was volunteering as a running coach for the fitness center.
Right.
So I kept that, and so some of the people that I was, that I had been in facilitated workshops with for this culture care, were in my classes, right? And it's like, oh man, how's it going? We got the cards, we did this. How's it happen? She goes, yeah, I'm in more meetings than I was before we started this.
Oh no. I wonder what happened.
It wasn't adopted.
Oh, well, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I find that, you know what, I've had to learn to let go a lot over the years. I'm like, okay, here's what's working and you can do it or not. It's up to you. You can choose. I can give you your misery back.
Yeah. I was sick after she said that. I was like, all that work that we put into that, and I was like, finally had gotten it. We had a method, and the whole, it was horrible. But you know what? But it just goes to show, that there are, like you said, it's not necessarily what they're asking you for. This person, this
That's right.
was asking about email. You turned on. It wasn't really email.
It's all about the email. Yeah. It's like someone asked me, even at the beginning when I was just doing straight image consulting, I'm like, there's always more in the closet than clothes. It's never really about the clothes.
I like that.
Right.
There's more in the closet than clothes.
Yep.
Very, very interesting. But anyway, so this has been a real eye opener. We covered, wow, man, we're Samus here. This is amazing. So let me just talk about Katherine's information. So she has, it's lzrkconsulting.com, and her book is Executive Being, Humanizing Business One Leader at a Time. Here you go. And
it's not a traditional business book, so don't try to read it like one or you'll be annoyed.
And you can pick it up on Amazon. There you go. Yep. So I will make sure that we have a link to her website, and we will also have a link to the book, because I think you need to pick that up if you're in a leadership position anywhere. And even if you're planning on moving into a leadership position, I would say definitely pick this up. And you could tell just by the nuggets of information that Katherine's given us today that it is definitely a worthwhile book to read. Also, so are you active on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and on LinkedIn.
Instagram and LinkedIn. That seems to be where the leaders hang out.
Cool kids. Right. It's really what that is. It's where the old people are. They're there.
Instagram, we stay with we're that's our professional lives, and Instagram is where we go to have fun. So it's great. Yeah. And then of course, you'll catch life-changing challengers on both of those as well. And that is what I got. Any parting words of wisdom there, Katherine?
Any parting words of wisdom? Your podcast is Life-Changing Challengers. And I think the one thing that I really want to impart to people is that it is never too late. If you're not dead, you're not done. So if you're thinking about making a change, my husband was in corporate for 20 years and he's made this change, and I've never seen him so happy at his work. And you deserve a life that suits you. So go out and get it.
All right. With that being said, I appreciate your time today, Katherine. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us all that wisdom. For the rest of you, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, and then hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. And even if you don't like it, let me know. Let me know why you don't like it so I can make the evolution and making sure that you're getting all the information that you can to make your next step the best possible. So thank you again. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. I'm your host, Brad Minus, saying thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. If today's stories inspired you, please take a moment to review, share, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more listeners and create an even bigger impact. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow. Until next time, keep pushing, keep challenging, and never stop pursuing your extraordinary.